When Patience dies, Captain Sarah Chen sat perfectly still in her chair, watching the Galactic Council tear apart 30 years of human contribution with casual indifference. The massive assembly hall stretched before her like a crystalline cathedral, its walls carved from living coral that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Representatives from 47 different species filled the curved seating areas, their forms as diverse as the worlds they came from. But Sarah's attention focused on the towering figure at the central podium. Ambassador Krelthan of the Zephyrian hegemony stood nearly 3 meters tall, his crystalline body refracting the chamber's soft light into prismatic rainbows. When he spoke, his voice resonated like wind chimes in a hurricane, beautiful and cutting. "The matter before us today is simple," Krelthan announced, his faceted head turning to survey the assembly. "The human species continues to expand beyond reasonable limits. They claim territories before proper surveys are completed. They establish colonies on worlds that should be preserved for more experienced civilizations." Sarah's jaw tightened. 3 weeks ago, human scouts had discovered a cluster of mineral-rich worlds in the outer veil. The planets were uninhabited, orbiting a dying star that would give them maybe 1,000 years before they became uninhabitable, perfect for short-term human mining operations, useless to the long-lived species that dominated the galaxy. "The Zephyrian hegemony has existed for 12,000 years, Krelthan continued, his voice growing more melodious as his arrogance increased. "We have learned patience. We have learned to consider the long-term consequences of our actions. Humanity has been part of our galactic community for merely 3 decades. Perhaps it is time they learned to wait their turn." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Altarian delegates, who looked like floating jellyfish made of pure energy, pulsed in harmonious approval. The Threnodi, massive insectoid creatures from the galactic core, clicked their mandibles in what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of applause. Sarah glanced at her wrist display. A message waited there, just 4 words in military code. "Silent departure stands ready." She kept her expression neutral, but inside, something cold and sharp settled in her chest. "Humans are useful, certainly," continued Veltar, the Altarian representative whose form shimmered between blue and gold. "They are excellent at maintenance tasks, system repairs, agricultural optimization. They have proven quite capable at managing the mundane aspects of galactic civilization." The condescension in Veltar's tone was unmistakable. Sarah thought about Dr. Jan Okafor, currently saving the Threnodi homeworld from a plague that their greatest scientists couldn't solve. She thought about the human engineering teams keeping the ancient Zephyrian star cities from collapsing under their own weight. She thought about the quiet efficiency with which human technicians had revolutionized galactic communications, transportation, and resource management. Mundane aspects. Right. "However," Veltar continued, "expansion rights must be earned through demonstrated wisdom and long-term thinking. The outer veil worlds should be preserved for a species with the patience to properly develop them." "Preserved for whom?" Sarah asked, her voice cutting through the chamber's acoustics like a blade. The assembly fell silent. Krelthan's crystalline features shifted into what might have been surprise. "Captain Chen," the floor was not yielded to the human delegation. "I apologize for the breach of protocol," Sarah said, rising from her seat. "But I'm curious. Which species exactly plans to develop these worlds over the next 1,000 years before they become uninhabitable?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah could see the representatives exchanging glances, their various forms of communication, creating a subtle web of unease throughout the chamber. "That is not the point," Krelthan said finally. "The point is that humans must learn to consider the greater good of galactic civilization, not merely their own immediate needs." Sarah almost laughed. The greater good. She thought about the message she'd received from General Marcus Webb 3 hours ago. The general had been conducting what he called a dependency audit for the past 6 months, quietly cataloging every system, every process, every critical function that humans had integrated themselves into over the past 30 years. The results had been staggering. Humans didn't just fix things. They had quietly, efficiently, and without fanfare become the invisible foundation upon which galactic civilization rested. They maintained the quantum networks that allowed faster-than-light communication. They operated the automated systems that kept trade flowing between star systems. They had developed the medical protocols that kept dozens of species healthy as they spread across the galaxy. Most importantly, they had done all of this while asking for nothing more than the chance to find new homes for their growing population. Captain Chen, Krelthan's voice had taken on a tone of barely contained irritation. Do you have something to contribute to this discussion, or are you simply here to waste the Council's time? Sarah looked around the chamber one last time. 47 species, representing trillions of beings across the galaxy. Most of them had never spared a thought for the humans who kept their worlds running, their ships flying, their people healthy, and fed. She touched her wrist display, sending a single response to General Webb's waiting message. Execute silent departure. Authorization, Chen 77 Alpha. Captain Chen? Krelthan's tone had shifted to outright annoyance. Sarah gathered her datapad and stood. I apologize, Ambassador Krelthan. It appears I have somewhere else to be. She walked toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind her, she could hear the rustle and murmur of confused representatives. Captain Chen, Krelthan's voice followed her, resonating with crystalline authority. The session is not concluded. Sarah paused at the massive doors carved from a single piece of living wood that had been growing for 3,000 years. She turned back to face the assembly, her expression calm. No, Ambassador, but humanity's participation in it is. The doors sealed behind her with a whisper of displaced air. In the corridor outside, Sarah activated her personal communicator. This is Captain Chen to all human personnel. Operation Silent Departure is now active. You have your orders. Across the galaxy, the message spread through encrypted channels that even the galaxy's best cryptographers couldn't break. Human engineers began shutting down critical systems with quiet efficiency. Human doctors started transferring their patients to alien colleagues, along with treatment protocols that would work for maybe a week before sophisticated medical equipment needed human oversight to function properly. Human technicians completed their current tasks with professional courtesy, then gathered their tools and left their workplaces forever. Dr. Jan Okafor was in the middle of synthesizing a cure for the Threnody plague when his communicator chimed. He read the message twice, then looked at the sophisticated biolaboratory around him. Everything in this facility had been designed by humans, built by humans, and maintained by humans for the past 15 years. The Threnody scientists working alongside him had never learned to operate the equipment independently. They had been content to let the clever humans handle the technical aspects while they focused on what they considered the more intellectual challenges of theoretical research. Jan began powering down the synthesis equipment, following protocols that would preserve his work but make it inaccessible without proper authorization codes. Dr. Okafor? Researcher Thrixtal looked up from her data analysis, her compound, eyes reflecting concern. What are you doing? I'm afraid I've been recalled to human space, Jan said, his voice professionally neutral. Effective immediately. But the cure, we're so close to completing it. My people are dying. Jan sealed his research notes into an encrypted data core. I've prepared detailed instructions for completing the synthesis. Any competent biochemist should be able to follow them. What he didn't mention was that the instructions required equipment that only functioned under human oversight, following protocols that had never been fully shared with non-human scientists. Not out of secrecy, but because no one had ever asked. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On Nexus Prime, the massive space station that served as the galactic government's headquarters, human technicians began a coordinated shutdown of systems that had run so smoothly for so long that most aliens had forgotten they needed maintenance. The quantum communication array that allowed instantaneous contact between star systems started showing error messages that made no sense to non-human engineers. The automated life support systems that kept millions of beings alive in the vacuum of space began displaying warnings in languages that only humans fully understood. Most critically, the vast network of human-maintained security protocols that kept the station's systems safe from hackers, pirates, and hostile entities began shutting down with quiet efficiency. Captain Sarah Chen had just reached her private quarters when the first emergency alert echoed through Nexus Prime's corridors. She paused, listening to the automated voice announcing a minor technical difficulty with the station's primary communication hub. She knew it wasn't minor. She knew that within hours the difficulties would cascade through interconnected systems that depended on each other in ways that the galaxy's leaders had never bothered to understand. Sarah activated her personal communicator one last time. General Webb, this is Captain Chen. Silent departure is proceeding as planned. All human personnel are withdrawing to predetermined rally points. General Webb's voice crackled through the encrypted channel. Understood, Captain. Transport ships are standing by at all major human installations. We'll have everyone out within 72 hours. And the dependency protocols? Already in motion. Critical systems will maintain basic function for approximately 1 week. After that, Webb's pause was eloquent. After that, they'll learn exactly how much they took for granted. Sarah looked out her quarters viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, 47 different species were about to discover that the quiet, efficient humans they had dismissed as useful but unremarkable had been the invisible architects of galactic civilization. The irony was beautiful in its simplicity. For 30 years, humans had solved problems, fixed systems, and maintained the complex infrastructure that allowed dozens of species to thrive across the galaxy. They had done it competently, quietly, and without asking for recognition or special treatment. All they had wanted was the chance to grow, to explore, to find new homes among the stars. Instead, they had been treated as junior partners, useful, servants whose contributions were acknowledged only when convenient for the real civilizations that supposedly knew better. Sarah began packing her personal belongings. Tomorrow, she would be aboard a human transport ship, heading for one of the new colonies that would soon be humanity's only homes in the galaxy. She wondered how long it would take the Galactic Council to realize their mistake. Her money was on less than a week. As she sealed her final storage container, another emergency alert echoed through the station. This one mentioned problems with the water recycling systems. Sarah smiled grimly. The cascade was beginning. Behind her, through the viewport, the stars waited with infinite patience. Soon humans would walk among them alone, building their own civilization without the casual contempt of species who had forgotten that competence and wisdom weren't measured in millennia. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about taking essential workers for granted. Sarah Chen looked forward to watching them learn it. When the lights go out 7 days after the humans left, Ambassador Krelthin stood in his private chambers, staring at a communication screen that displayed nothing but static. For the first time in his 2-century lifespan, the crystalline Zephyrian felt something uncomfortably close to panic. The first problems had seemed minor. A few technical glitches in the communication array, some minor hiccups in the life support systems. Nothing that couldn't be handled by the galaxy's finest engineers and technicians, except the galaxy's finest engineers and technicians had apparently been human all along. Ambassador, his aide Zerthik entered the chamber without the usual ceremonial announcement. The younger Zephyrian's crystalline form flickered with stress patterns that Krelthin had never seen before. We need to discuss the cascade failures. Cascade failures. The term had become horrifyingly familiar over the past week. It turned out that galactic civilization wasn't held together by ancient wisdom and superior alien intelligence. It was held together by an intricate web of human-maintained systems that depended on each other in ways that no one else had bothered to understand. "Show me the latest reports," Krelthin said, his melodious voice sounding flat even to his own ears. Zerthik activated a portable display unit, one of the few pieces of technology still functioning reliably. The holographic projection showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, color-coded by system status. A week ago, it had been a comfortable blend of green and blue, indicating normal operations and minor maintenance needs. Now it looked like a disease map, Angry red dots marked complete system failures. Yellow indicated critical problems. Orange showed cascading breakdowns that were spreading from system to system like a technological plague. The outer rim colonies have lost faster-than-light communication. Entirely, Zerthik reported. The Altarian trade networks are operating at 15% capacity. 3 major shipping lanes have been abandoned due to navigation system failures. Krelthan studied the map with growing horror. What about our own territories? The ancient cities on Zephyr Prime are experiencing structural problems. The gravity generators that keep them stable in our gas giant's atmosphere are showing error, messages that our best technicians cannot interpret. The weight of that statement settled on Krelthan, like a collapsing star. Zephyr Prime housed billions of his people in floating cities that had been marvels of engineering for thousands of years. If those cities fell into the gas giant's crushing depths, how long before critical failure? Unknown. The human engineers who maintained the systems never shared their detailed operational protocols. They simply fixed things when they broke down, and now they were gone. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place with increasing desperation. On the water world of Altair Prime, Veltar floated in his private chambers, his energy form flickering between distressed colors as he reviewed reports from across his people's territory. The Altarians had built their civilization on patience and long-term thinking. They made decisions that took decades to implement, secure in the knowledge that their energy-based forms gave them effective immortality. They had plenty of time to consider every angle, every consequence. What they hadn't considered was how much their patient civilization depended on systems that needed constant, immediate maintenance. The trade network control systems are completely incomprehensible without human oversight, reported Nalith, Veltar's chief administrator. We have 17 different species trying to reverse engineer the protocols, but the programming languages appear to be human innovations that were never shared with our databases. Veltar pulsed a deep blue, the Altarian equivalent of a sigh. What about the medical facilities? 3 quarantine worlds have declared medical emergencies. The automated pharmaceutical synthesis systems that produce medications for cross-species compatibility have shut down. Without them, we cannot safely treat patients from other civilizations. The irony was devastating. The Altarians prided themselves on being the galaxy's greatest diplomats, capable of finding common ground between any species. Their medical facilities had been showcases of interspecies cooperation, treating beings from dozens of different evolutionary backgrounds. It turned out that the common ground had been human-developed protocols that allowed wildly different physiologies to coexist safely. On the insectoid world of Threnod, the situation was approaching catastrophe. Researcher Thrixtal stood in her laboratory, surrounded by sophisticated equipment that had become as useful as decorative sculptures. The plague that was killing her people showed no signs of slowing, and the cure that had been so close to completion might as well have been on the other side of the galaxy. Have we made any progress with Dr. Okafor's notes? She asked her research team, though she already knew the answer from the way their antennae drooped with exhaustion. The synthesis protocols are written in a biochemical notation system that we cannot fully decode, reported senior researcher Clithmore. We understand perhaps 30% of the instructions. Attempting to follow them blindly has resulted in 3 laboratory accidents and 1 minor explosion. Thrixtal's compound eyes reflected the dying light of her homeworld's sun. Through the laboratory's transparent walls, she could see the massive funeral pyres that burned day and night, consuming the bodies of those who had died while the cure remained tantalizingly out of reach. What about direct communication with the humans? Surely they would help us complete the cure if we explained the situation. Clithmore's mandibles clicked with frustration. All attempts to contact human territories have been unsuccessful. Their communication networks are no longer accepting transmissions from non-human sources. Meanwhile, in the deepest regions of space, pirate fleets were having the time of their lives. Captain Rixtar, a scarred veteran of a dozen different species military forces, stood on the bridge of his raider ship, watching cargo vessels drift helplessly through space. It's like they're begging us to rob them. he told his mixed crew of outcasts and criminals. Navigation systems down. Defense, grids offline. Even their distress beacons are malfunctioning. What Rixtar didn't fully understand was that human cybersecurity specialists had spent decades quietly patching vulnerabilities in galactic computer systems. They had built invisible walls around civilian shipping, protected communication networks from intrusion, and maintained defense protocols that kept pirates like him operating on the fringes of civilized space. Now those walls were gone, and the pirates were discovering that galactic civilization had been surprisingly soft underneath its protective shell. Target the Altarian medical transport, Rixtar ordered. Their cargo should be worth millions on the black market. The attack proceeded without resistance. The transport ship's defense systems tried to activate, then crashed with error messages that made no sense to anyone aboard. The crew's distress calls disappeared into communication networks that no longer functioned properly. Within hours, life-saving medical supplies bound for 3 different worlds had disappeared into the criminal underworld, where they would be sold to the highest bidder while people died for lack of treatment. Back on Nexus Prime, the galactic government was slowly realizing the scope of their catastrophe. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council were being held every 6 hours, but the sessions themselves were hampered by communication problems that made coordination nearly impossible. Ambassador Krelthan found himself in the unprecedented position of having to physically travel to other representatives' quarters for face-to-face meetings, something that hadn't been necessary in decades. The situation is deteriorating faster than our projections indicated, reported Chief Administrator Plexen, a multi-tentacled being whose species specialized in logistics and resource management. We initially calculated that critical systems would remain functional for at least 2 weeks without human oversight. And now? We were wrong. The humans didn't just maintain our systems. They created invisible redundancies, fail-safes, and backup protocols that we never knew existed. As these hidden systems fail, they're creating cascade effects that are bringing down our primary systems much faster than anticipated. Krelthan's crystalline form flickered with stress patterns. What are our options? We could attempt to contact the humans and negotiate their return. On what terms? They walked out of the council completely. They've cut off all communication with non-human territories. For all we know, they're already establishing their own independent civilization. The thought was sobering. Humanity had been part of galactic civilization for only 30 years, but they had integrated themselves so thoroughly into its infrastructure that their sudden absence was causing a collapse that might take centuries to repair, if it could be repaired at all. There is another possibility, Plexan said carefully. Our intelligence networks have detected increased human activity in the outer veil territories they claimed before leaving. They appear to be establishing permanent colonies. You mean they're not planning to return? It would appear that humanity has decided to go it alone. The magnitude of that decision was staggering to consider. Humans were still a relatively young species, lacking the advanced technology and ancient wisdom of civilizations that had been traveling between stars for millennia. Going it alone should have been suicide, except they were the ones who understood how everything actually worked. Reports began filtering in from across the galaxy of human colonies not just surviving, but thriving. Their ships moved efficiently through space using navigation systems that the rest of the galaxy could no longer access. Their communication networks functioned perfectly, while everyone else's failed. Their defensive systems kept pirates and raiders away, while other species fell victim to increasingly bold attacks. Most remarkably, they were apparently reverse engineering and improving upon technologies that other species had been using for thousands of years. Free from the bureaucratic restrictions and condescending attitudes of the Galactic Council, human innovation was accelerating at a pace that terrified the older civilizations. They're not just surviving, Zelthic reported during one of the emergency council sessions. They're advancing. Our long-range sensors are detecting energy signatures from human space that we cannot identify. They're developing technologies that we don't understand. Veltar's energy form pulsed with distressed colors. How is that possible? They've only been spacefaring for 30 years. Because, said a new voice from the chamber's entrance, they Never stopped innovating while the rest of you were content to coast on ancient achievements. Every head, tentacle, and sensory organ in the chamber turned toward the speaker. Dr. Jan Okafor stood in the doorway, looking older and more tired than when he had left Threnod 7 days earlier. Dr. Okafor, Krelthan's voice resonated with surprised relief. You've returned. No, Jan said quietly. I haven't. I'm here under a flag of truce to deliver a message from the Human Colonial Assembly. He walked to the center of the chamber, his presence somehow commanding attention despite his unremarkable appearance. The Galactic Council wanted us to learn patience and respect for your ancient wisdom. Well, we've learned something, but it wasn't what you intended to teach us. What message do you bring? Veltar asked, his form flickering between hope and fear. Jan activated a portable projector, displaying an image of thriving human colonies among the stars. Humanity formally withdraws from all mutual defense pacts, trade agreements, and cooperative ventures with the species represented in this council. We will no longer maintain your systems, solve your problems, or provide our services to civilizations that consider us useful but expendable. The chamber erupted in protests and desperate pleas, but Jan continued speaking over the chaos. However, the Human Colonial Assembly is prepared to establish new relationships based on mutual respect and fair exchange. Any species that wishes to trade with humanity as equals, rather than as supervisors managing useful servants, may send ambassadors to our territories to negotiate. And the cure for the Threnodi plague? Thrixtal's voice cut through the noise, desperate and pleading. Jan's expression softened slightly. Will be completed and provided free of charge because allowing people to die for political reasons is not who we are. Unlike some species, we don't use suffering as a negotiating tool. The barb hit home. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But this is the last time humanity will clean up problems created by the galaxy's negligence. Going forward, you'll need to maintain your own systems, solve your own crises, and face your own consequences. Krelthan stood, his crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights in desperate patterns. Dr. Okafor, surely we can reach some accommodation. The galaxy needs human expertise. The galaxy had human expertise, Jan replied calmly. For 30 years we gave you everything we had, asking only for the chance to grow and explore alongside you. Instead, you treated us like competent janitors whose opinions didn't matter when real decisions were being made. He began walking toward the exit. Now you'll discover what the galaxy looks like without janitors. As the chamber doors sealed behind him, the assembled representatives sat in stunned silence. Outside, the lights of Nexus Prime flickered as another critical system failed, and somewhere in the distance an alarm began to sound. The age of human support was over. The age of consequences had begun, and in the outer veil humanity continued building something new among the stars, finally free to show the galaxy what they could accomplish when they weren't being held back by the condescending wisdom of their supposed betters. The students had become the teachers, and the lesson was just beginning.